Everyone moves on. Everyone moves on. I was talking to my friend Scott Britton, who sold his company Salesforce, and he was on some podcast saying, like, what have you learned? And he's like, it's cool, but people just get over it, and they were not as like it's not like all of a sudden they treat me like a completely different person, like I'm this amazing person who's had his big exit, right? Everyone moves on, and so you have to really enjoy the journey. You have to really appreciate it, and that's not to say that you obviously don't get to be in new positions, have new opportunities, and because you've made this achievement. But the achievement is just a result, a natural result of doing all the sort of right steps along the way, right? What is it? Bill Walsh, who says the score takes care of itself. I think the same thing is true in life and business.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
So where are you on the road right now?
I'm in San Francisco. I'm headed to Bangkok, where my wife is building a textile art installation for the rest of the year. So I'll be
oh my goodness
joining her for the rest of that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was reading your bio and I saw that you live in Brooklyn. Is that or maybe just temporarily? I don't know if that's your home base.
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn most of the time, and then I'll be temporarily in Bangkok.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And where are you based again?
Well, right now I'm based out on Long Island. So I'm on the same geographical piece of land as Brooklyn, but it's not considered, Brooklyn is not Long Island. I didn't know, I grew up here, and then I left for college, and I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I lived out there forever and a day, and recently returned here. My dad died a couple of years ago, and I stepped in to help out with my mom. And so my temporary resting spot is out here on the North Shore of Long Island. And it's been a very strange, you do a lot. I mean, I see we're going to be talking a lot about reinvention and pivoting and all that. Boy, did I pivot. Wow. Wow, did I ever pivot?
Yeah, I think family really can throw you for a loop and change what you think you're going to be spending where you're going to be spending your time. I tell my wife this a lot. Her parents are a bit older and are just like not as in robust health. And so I'm like, I'm kind of ready at any time to hear a call that's like they, can no longer take care of themselves, and we're going to have to be there. We've had to jump in at various times, but, sort of like, if that call were to ever happen, I won't be surprised at any time. You know what I mean? Like, even though it's sort of, they live in Atlanta, and I don't think we want to live there, but we would be sort of prepared to go there if that's what it took. Yeah.
Again, I mean, the work you do, Jason, and we're going to get into that here in a minute, is so relevant to what so many of us are facing head on right now, whether it's parents who are getting up in age and are losing one or both, and then having to look at what does that mean for the family. And then there's also, we're post-pandemic, but there's still a big hangover from the pandemic and the changes that brought about very suddenly for everybody. And, you've been immersed in that. And so, team, I'm talking with Jason Shen today, and you've heard a little bit of our conversation. I'd like to properly introduce him. But first, Jason, I would like to ask you, are you ready for kickoff?
I'm so ready to kick off, Mary.
I'm so excited to talk with you today because you do such really interesting work. And so, team, let me give you a little background on Jason, and then he's going to jump into telling us about his new book, the work he's doing, his background, his leadership journey, all the great stuff that we talk about here on the Play Your Position podcast. So, Jason Shen, he's a former national champion gymnast and an executive coach with a focus on resilience and reinvention. As the CEO of Refactor Labs, he coaches entrepreneurs and teams through crucial transitions and writes about creative risk-taking in his weekly newsletter called Cultivating Resilience. He has been published in TechCrunch, Fast Company, and Vox, and a speaker at Grubhub, Procter & Gamble, and Pinterest. Like I said, Jason has a new book that, is it out yet? Is it dropping this fall?
It's going to be dropping in about a month. Yeah. So
awesome.
Very exciting.
Yeah. I'm going to have you talk about that. Jason has experienced multiple setbacks in his life, including layoffs, lawsuits, company failure, and traumatic knee injuries. And out of those experiences, he ventured out to understand what it takes to adapt and overcome adversity. And he's developed a resilience rules framework. It's helped hundreds of founders, leaders, and professionals learn to respond, restore, rebuild, and reflect in the face of change. And, he's done so many things. He's created companies, he's sold companies, he holds the Guinness World Record for Aztec push-ups, and he has 2 degrees from Stanford University. Today, he's coming to us from San Francisco, but his home base is in Brooklyn, New York. He has a beautiful wife named Amanda, who is a multidisciplinary artist. And Jason, is there anything else I need to add before we get into your story?
I'm blushing, but no, thank you. Let's jump in. Mary, I've been so excited to get on this show because I love the sports metaphor you use. Obviously, I have a sports background myself, and I think that there's so many parallels in the way we think about leadership and the way we think about living life that sports can provide. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's absolutely my honor. I feel so lucky to get to talk to people like you who have done some amazing things in the world and continue to show up as a leader. And so let's get the story, let's get the context built here, Jason. When did you get the call to leadership? How old were you? What was going on in your life at the time? And how did answering that call guide you to what you do today?
Yeah, so I'll give you sort of 3 mini anecdotes that I think culminated in that call to leadership, because the first one was really in high school. I didn't really see myself as a leader, but looking back, I had a group of friends and we all kind of hung out together, but I gave us a name. I gave us a name that the Sinic 8, because we were all Chinese, and S8 became our sort of moniker. And I think that by giving ourselves a name, we created an identity and created a connection to each other that it wouldn't have been if it was just, hey, the other guys that I hang out with after school. So looking back, that was like, hey, that was kind of like a move to kind of give ourselves a name. But
wow.
Then in college, I think was when it really started, because you heard about my knee injury. I had a pretty severe knee injury that I dislocated my knee on the vault, and we can talk more about that. But in the recovery process, is when I really sort of transformed. I think that adversity, one, caused my teammates to see me in a new light, because I was kind of the silly, happy-go-lucky kid. And that really helped them see that I was, I'd gone through something really difficult, and I showed up every day and didn't complain about, how hard it was to not play and be on the team. And eventually they voted me captain my 5th year. And that was an important turning point. And that injury also caused me to join a group of other students who started a nonprofit organization. And so that also pushed me into entrepreneurship. So I would say that time in college was when I really first heard the call to leadership.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how it takes a traumatic event like blowing out your knee or any kind of injury for anybody who's been in athletics, whether as a young person or throughout your life, when something doesn't work in our body anymore and you can't do what you've been doing, that is a moment where you either choose what you did, which you continue to show up. You didn't go away and feel sorry for yourself, and you, to your point, they voted you captain. So that says a lot about your character. And I think we always have a choice when life throws us that curveball, that metaphorical curveball. And so I'm taking it, you were at Stanford when that happened. Were you
Yeah.
there because of your gymnastics prowess?
That's right. I like to say that as an immigrant to the United States, I got to be appreciated for what I bring to the table. In China, I was a good gymnast. I was a good student, and I was a good gymnast. And in China, you kind of got to pick a lane and really be the best student or be the best athlete. And there's a fierce competition. In the United States, you get credit for being both. You're a student
Yeah.
athlete, and so I got into Stanford under their pretty high standards, but I also was recognized for my gymnastics ability and was able to get some of my schooling paid for because I was good at this sport. It's still kind of a funny way to think about who gets to pay for college, and I think that's a whole other conversation. But I
Yeah.
got to have some of my expensive tuition covered because I was good at this sport.
And so that you did end up heading into entrepreneurship, and here you are today. You have a book, The Path to Pivot, that's coming out, like you said, in about a month. And some of the topics that one of your key topics, Jason, is to pivot or not to pivot, what to do when you are stuck in your business. So I'd love for you to tell us more about your book and that particular fork in the road that many people face, not just once, but several times in their careers.
Yeah. I think, Mary, the question is, do you grit it out and keep going in your business? Do you pivot and make a really big change? Or do you quit and, walk away and find something else to do? And I think too often people skip that idea that a big change could be possible. To them, it's almost like the same as quitting, and quitting is really a four-letter word in their mind. And so they just kind of keep going until they're totally burned out, or until, all the money's pretty much gone, or until everyone on the team is like, we don't want to do this anymore because there's no future here. And then they have a, oh, shoot, moment. And that, you know, I'm trying to help people avoid those outcomes, right? Like, I think when things get hard, the first thing we want to do is quit. But everyone who's listening to this podcast has learned not to quit and instead to keep pushing. And that's a really important lesson, but you can overlearn that lesson. And there's another path. And that's the way I think about it is, if you still feel like you have momentum, but it's just slower than you want, and you still have new ideas for how your business works. Like, I work with a lot of venture-backed startup founders who are working on their product, and they have lots of different product ideas and new channels they want to test to grow their user base. Even if it's really hard and they're tired, they should keep going, right? They should grit it out. They should keep at it. But if they're feeling like, I have energy and I want to keep doing this, but like nothing we've tried is really working, and we've been at this for months, maybe even years, and don't have a lot to show for ourselves, and we don't really have that many ideas for where to go next, that's when a pivot might make a lot of sense. And then finally, if you have, both no sense of energy, the company's going in without a direction, and, the rest of the team seems pretty sort of, dried up too, and unable to sort of move forward, that can be a time to put things down and go to your investors and say, I'm sorry, this didn't work out. Because the truth is, your career, your life is more than one business, more than one job. And you need to preserve yourself, because if you really hit the ground all the way and you don't hit the eject button, that can take a really long time to recover from, versus pulling the ejection cord before you sort of fully blow up, and kind of be able to move forward sooner.
Wow. That's a hard decision. It's a hard decision for people to make, is to walk away from something that perhaps was their dream, despite all the signs saying this isn't going to work.
And
I think
it's one that I've experienced on both sides, if you don't mind me sharing.
please share. I would love for you to tell your story about that.
I had my first business, only a few years after Stanford. I'd gotten into this prestigious Y Combinator program with two friends of mine who were both, software engineers from Stanford and Berkeley. It was kind of like the classic trio where you live together. We're all Asian American. It's like out of Silicon Valley, right? Of course, these guys are going to start a company.
Right.
And we kept, one warning sign was kept changing the idea we were playing with. And the Y Combinator was like, well, we like you. We don't know if we like your idea. We were pitching them something else. We got in and we spent a couple of weeks still kind of sorting out what we were doing. And then we got a little pressure from the demo day that was coming. So we ended up honing in on this long distance ride sharing. This was in 2011. Airbnb was kind of like the hot young startup darling. And there was all this talk of the sharing economy and other things that could be shared and overlapped. And we said, what about long distance rides? We love road trips. We love, traveling down to LA or going to festivals like Burning Man. This is another place where sharing rides could be really great. And so we launched a business doing that. We raised a little more than $1 million, and we went at it. And we were at it for about 18 months. And we realized that the money was really in this intra-city ride sharing. And we'd been growing from Craigslist, and then Craigslist cut us off. We had this iPhone app that launched that didn't go anywhere, and we'd spent all this time and money into it. And so we were really stuck. And we tried to keep the original team, and we'd grown to about 8 and tried to pivot with the team. We sort of knew that growing and going in the direction we were going didn't make sense. We tried to pivot. We couldn't pivot with the sort of 8 people, and often you have to sort of trim down if you want to change because not everyone wants to come with you on that new journey. And so we did. We let people go. That was hard. We got rid of our office. We're back in our apartment. It really felt like, we were experiencing this dream, and then all of a sudden we're back in our apartment throwing stuff on the wall, being like, hey, what if we built this? What if we built that? 6 months go by and we still haven't picked anything. And I actually was the first one to kind of say, you know what? I don't know if this is happening for us. We can't just buckle down and go with something. And I actually kind of soft, quiet quit. I applied for an opportunity in DC that seemed very remote, but interesting. And when I got it, I said, guys, I think this is it. And we ended up returning money to our investors. So that to me was kind of like an attempted pivot that turned into a quit, but not from an intentional perspective, but more from a just like, I can't even admit to myself that I'm quitting this experience. So that was really, there was a lot of shame in that, in that experience.
Yeah. So for people listening who may have experienced something like that and haven't addressed the emotions, you mentioned shame. Certainly, I'm sure there was guilt because there were people that had a dream with you, right? Because what happens when an idea comes to life and then we live in a culture where everything is so in our face about the success stories, and who among us hasn't at least once entertained the idea of, if I just got in on fill in the blank. You mentioned Airbnb. Certainly, the big 4 that are now dominating the planet. There are people who said, I could have gotten in on, one of them, and I didn't. But none of us knows, right? And it sounds like the 3 of you at the core of the company you had all the right intentions and the vision and the work ethic, and you were able to get some money and finally land on an idea, and yet it still didn't work out. And what's interesting to me listening, I've just met you virtually here. I listened to a story like this and I think, that sounds about right for who of a certain age or after a certain age has not known something like that. And would you mind talking about what were some of the ways you worked through the post era of that experience in terms of what was, I don't know when you
Yeah.
wrote your book, but did writing help? Did you go into meditation? Did you hire, did you go into, work with a counselor? Did just talk
Yeah,
to anybody?
there was a lot of pieces to this, right? So I had kind of left my our San Francisco apartment to take on this fellowship in DC. It was only 6 months, so it felt kind of like a temporary reprieve. But I changed locations, right? So that's step one. I changed
Yeah.
locations, which meant that in what some ways I felt like I was running away from my shame, but in other ways, it kind of just put me in front of a new group of people in a new environment, which was like kind of bringing tech people into government. And so I was learning about government. I was learning about the organization I've been sort of detailed to, the Smithsonian. That was very fun. And I was meeting all these new people who didn't know me as the failed entrepreneur. They knew me as one of our fellows who were all doing, work together. So that kind of helped reset my identity. And at the end of that fellowship, I said, this was fun. I don't think DC is for me. And sort of government right now is not really my jam. But I had a choice of whether to go back to San Francisco because I was still on the lease or kind of keep the adventure going. And for me,
Hmm.
I've always been interested in moving forward. So I moved from DC to New York and in 2014. And there I had a new challenge, which is no one will rent an apartment to you unless you have a job. And so I had to go and sleep on couches for about 9 weeks, rotating every week or two between one of my friends, and
Wow.
interviewed for a position because the job was so short, the fellowship was so short that there wasn't time to really job hunt. I hadn't really decided what I wanted to do afterwards. So I went to DC or I went to New York and job hunted in person and eventually landed a job and then could go and get that apartment. And so changing environments twice was really good. Again, I didn't jump into another company right away. I had to build my confidence again. So, some people have shut down their businesses and then just jump right into another business. And I have a lot of admiration for that. That wasn't me. I needed
Hmm.
time to do other things, to be exposed to other people, to work on things where I was like, hey, I'm good at this. I needed to live my life. When I started that company, I was 24 and they said, solve problems you understand. I was like, I don't even really know any problems besides like laundry, getting a date, saving some more money,
Basic things.
basic things. That's dating companies are notoriously difficult to start. So working several years in different positions. I worked at another startup that was a bit further along. Then I worked at Etsy as a product manager. That gave me new context, gave me new ideas, helped me see what it's like to work inside, larger organizations. And I did hire a coach. I hired a coach while I was at Etsy. And I said, hey, I want to leave Etsy to start my company. And I want you to support me on that journey. And that coach, Hamilton, was with me for 4 years through
Wow. Yeah.
Etsy, through starting a new business, through pivoting that business, through the pandemic, and eventually through an exit to Facebook.
Yeah.
And so all of those things were really important for helping me. Oh, and the last thing was writing about my lessons learned every year for several years. I had as a goal to like write everything I learned about building that company. And every year I would kind of find some reason to not spend time on it. But it was after the fourth year. And it's so funny now to look back, that was, 4 or 5 years later is when I started the new business. And it's also, I published lessons learned from Ride Joy in 2017. And at the end of that year, I started my new business. So that's got to tell you something.
It does. It really does. I mean, I'm a huge proponent. Team PYP knows because I'm always ringing this bell about writing your lessons, your insights, your feelings, your observations, whatever it may be. Document your life through the written word. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can do that now. If the act of physically writing is difficult for whatever reason, or an idea comes into your head, pull out your phone and open the voice memo and just dictate. And then you can have it transcribed. There's all kinds of ways to capture what we experience. And obviously your lessons have impacted others. I mean, you're speaking, your book is coming out. You're here on my podcast, and I'm sure you're on other podcasts as well, talking about these things that we all face. And your journey is it. On the outside, it would be easy for people to say, "Oh, he had a company acquired by Facebook. Lucky him." But you go behind that, and all the different things that you did and experienced leading up to that, Jason, is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? It's not the exit. That's what everybody faces or focuses on, but it's not that.
I tell my coaching clients today that, there is no external victory or achievement that's going to make up for compromising your values, your health, or your close, intimate relationships, because that's really what makes life worth living, worth savoring. And, we learned this lesson when we won the NCAA championship at Stanford. It was something we've been building towards for years and years and years. When I remember my freshman year joining, we said our goal was to win the NCAA championship. We didn't even get into the finals that first year, so we were not even close. But every year we made progress towards it. And that final year, we did win it. And it was only because I injured my knee that I got to be a part of the team that ultimately won the championship.
Wow. That's an irony.
That's an irony, yeah. And it felt so great to do it. We high-fived each other. We felt like, on top of the world for about a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had finals, you had job interviews, you had whatever else is going on. People stop being like, "Oh, this is so awesome." Everyone moves on. Everyone moves on. I was talking to my friend Scott Britton, who sold his company Salesforce, and he was on some podcast saying like, "What have you learned?" And he's like, it's cool, but people just get over it, and they were not as like it's not like all of a sudden they treat me like a completely different person, like I'm this amazing person who's had his big exit, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Everyone moves on, and so you have to really enjoy the journey. You have to really appreciate it, and that's not to say that you obviously don't get to be in new positions, have new opportunities, and because you've made this achievement, but the achievement is just a natural result of doing all the sort of right steps along the way, right? What is it? Bill Walsh, who says, the score takes care of itself. I think the same thing is true in life and business.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Oh, I love that. The score takes care of itself. It's so true. And yeah, you can enjoy the parade for one day and then the parade's over.
They stop having the parades. They don't have a second parade.
No, it's not a week long or year, the rest of your life. You're going to, and you don't want to parade the rest of your life. That would get really old really fast. It's fun in the moment. And so thank you for being candid about that. I think that's important for everybody to hear, and to also for the reminder that it really is about the journey, and stay true to what's most important to you. Know what your values are, know who is in your inner circle, and keep them close. I think about, there's a song by Don Henley, which dates me a little bit, but he talks about in a New York, the song is called New York Minute, and how quickly our life can change in a New York minute. And you've lived in New York, Jason, you understand that reference. New Yorkers are always on the move. This is one of the fastest places. People are always, I got to get somewhere. People talk fast, they talk loud, and they're always going somewhere. It's really interesting. Anyway, I would like to pivot a little bit. One of your things that you like to talk about is why traditional masculinity hurts resilience for everyone. Could you go into more detail about that? Because
Yeah.
I think I chose deliberately a metaphor for this show, Play Your Position, using American football, which I love to watch, particularly college football. Go Ducks. I'm sorry, Pac-12, which
Woo.
is falling apart as we
Oh
speak.
man,
It's
yes,
so
everyone's
sad.
exiting.
I don't even want to go there, but I'm sorry about your Stanford team this year.
I know. I
It's not.
guess whatever this new consortium we're in, and it doesn't really make sense to me. But
It makes no sense. But anyway, my point is, I love American football, and you don't get more masculine than that. And yet, masculinity I think both femininity and masculinity have been on the chopping block for quite some time. So I would love for you to go into more detail, the connection between traditional masculinity. Would you define that for us? And then talk about how it impacts resilience or hurts resilience for people.
yeah, so this is a very hot topic, and I love that you brought it here, especially with the sort of metaphors of sports and football, because there's definitely a connection there. So traditional masculinity is defined as a set of norms and tropes that relate to dominance, aggression, withholding of emotions outside of anger, a sort of sexual prowess as being championed, but anti-femininity and anti-homophobe, anti homosexuality. So those are some of the core tenets of traditional masculinity that have kind of emerged over the last 50 or 100 years. It has become this sort of like bundle, this like
Mm.
TV bundle, if you will,
Like,
of various
yes, yes.
values. And the American Psychological Association released a report, I think in 2018, after almost 10 years of work on this, and they've released these reports for different groups, working with African Americans, working with women, working with disabled people, all these different sort of reports that are like, hey, here are things to look out for when working with this particular population of individuals. And the last one they did were men. And they had a lot to say about this topic. And it's been reflected in my own life as an athlete, as an entrepreneur, which is that if you score people on like, hey, here are all these things, like how much do you agree with all these different, like, men should never cry or show any kind of weakness, men should this and that. And you sort of score them on these dimensions. You can imagine someone who's super dialed in on some of those values I just described. And what they found is they, were less likely to take care of their health. They were less likely to reach out to other people when they needed help and reach for social support. And they had worse mental and physical health outcomes because of it. There was a correlation, between those factors. And it's sad because there are really the thing is there's this phrase toxic masculinity that's kind of emerged, and for some men that really puts them on edge because they're saying, well, all this stuff that I've been told I need to be now, all that's bad. And to some degree that's an understandable reaction
Oh,
because
yeah.
you're one of the things that the report and I think men in general understand is that being a man is not a given. Being a man is something that is earned through the approval of other men, and that can be taken away if the judgment by those other men deems that you are not, you don't qualify. You're not in the club. Your manhood can be stripped, and so men are often very cognizant of that, and aware of status, aware of position, aware of judgment. We a lot of our society talks about the judgment that women face, and they do face a tremendous amount of judgment. They need to be a certain way. They feel this pressure and these expectations, but men also have those, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
put on by other men. We do it to ourselves. That you like don't be a wuss, or don't get it together, man up, right? All these phrases. It's like you're not being a man, and if you keep doing this, I'm going to reject you from our group. So all of those things hurt our ability to be resilient, because being resilient requires being vulnerable. There's just no way around it. You cannot be self-reliant. You cannot self-reliant your way into
No, you
feeling
can't.
great. Maybe you can get out of like total, disaster on your own. But like, even if you survive in the wilderness for 200 days by yourself, you still need to get rescued by somebody. You still need to get your wounds tended to. Someone needs to feed you, fix you up. Your self-reliance is good to keep you from just completely dying out of hunger or thirst or, whatever's out there in the jungle. But you're still going to need somebody else and a whole group of people to kind of bring you back to 100%. So that's the thing that we often forget.
Oh, wow. Thank you for speaking so eloquently about this. The internet has brought to light and has made these memes with terms like toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. And I think everybody listening today, and you and I certainly, Jason, I'm so aware of these conversations.
Yeah.
And, I'm a woman who loves men for being men. And I feel like this whole notion of what it means to be a man is under fire, just as it has been to be a woman. It's kind of like, can we just let go of the nonsense and focus on life and what brings people lights people up inside? And I think we have to go through the ugliness and the conversations that are awkward, and have people be angry very openly about, and I'm not just talking about men being angry, women are angry too, because, we feel this pressure to be all things to all people all the time. And you can't, and men, I think, feel, the men in my life anyway, are very much programmed to provide. That's what drives them. They want to make sure that the people they care about, their, small little tribe or large tribe, as the case may be, are safe. There's that protective instinct. And, I was raised by, my father was a scientist. And so I grew up in a home where we talked about the laws of physics and chemistry and biology. And these laws are universal, right? It's our cultural, like you said, the last 50 to 100 years has created this, for lack of a better term, the bundle of this. This is what it means to be fill in the blank. And we're in a really interesting time right now, because so many voices are saying, no, that's not what it means to be this. No, that's not what it means to be that. Well, then what does it mean?
It's interesting. I love, the book Sapiens, which, made its rounds over the last number of years. Noah Yuval Harari, he talks about this idea that whenever anybody says something's not natural, it's not biological, or it's just biology. The fact is, we are products of our biology. He likes to say that nature allows, culture forbids.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you look in any sort of across animal species, every kind of thing you can imagine that we think of as, strange or weird or taboo, it's all there, and nature does wonderful things and does horrific things. Mothers killing their children, or a father, trying to get into a new tribe, war, rape, homosexuality, it's all these things that we're like, oh my God, those are all terrible. That's terrible. It happens, right? And it's just, animals sort of are sort of, there's a genetic diversity. We have diversity in our species in the way behavior emerges. And culture is all about, hey, don't steal, don't do this, don't do that. And that's good. That's good for sort of guiding and shaping our societies to be a certain way. But to say that it's not natural for it's natural, and the correct ways that men have to be like this and women have to be like this is sort of, that's actually culture, right? Because men, across history and across time, my wife is in Thailand right now doing work on a textile installation. There are matrilineal sort of things that get passed on, and there are parts of Asia where there are, the matriarchy is sort of how decisions are made, the name is passed on, all of these things happen. And, they would see masculinity and femininity in a different way. And that's just how it emerged in their society. So because we do have a diverse society, I think it can get complicated and confusing, especially in the United States and in sort of the West, where we do have this pluralism. Because to bring it back to something business oriented for a minute, diversity performs better but feels worse.
Oh.
So when you have, they've done this interesting study, right? You have a group of college students, because that's often what you study in psychology, and they were either of all the same fraternity or sorority or different fraternities and sororities. And obviously, groups that were in the same fraternity and sorority solving problems together felt better, more fun. Hey, we're all together. We're all, doing our thing. And the groups where there were some, it was different, right? It was different groups, even though, maybe a lot of the other thing, same gender, maybe even the same race, but there was a known difference, right? Hey, you're not one of us. We're not the same. It felt worse to be in that, because you didn't, you had to be more careful. You had to think about what you were going to say. But guess what? Those groups performed better on the problems that they were trying to solve, even if they felt less confident and worse in the process, because that diversity forced them to think harder, and, they ended up getting to better answers.
How fascinating. How fascinating. So what wins at the end of the day? Feeling better or better performance?
Right. You have to accept that. I mean, this goes back to a lesson that we all keep learning, which is that growth doesn't always feel good, right?
Oh God, no.
Yeah, people go kicking and streaming through it, and that's how you grow. But I think going through, whether it's a pivot in your business, whether it's a change in your career, or where you live and what you thought you were going to be doing with your life, as we were talking about earlier in the show, those things don't always feel good, and they require us to go into the unfamiliar, go into the uncertain of, well, I don't know what's going to happen if I do this. I've done this other thing, and that's kind of worked. Doesn't seem to be working anymore. But I'm not sure how this is supposed to go. So if the more we can get comfortable with that change, the more we can get comfortable with that uncertainty and the struggle. That's something I talk about with my clients all the time, especially entrepreneurs, because they have a high tolerance compared to the rest of the general population, but it's still, everyone's grasping for, I want to know that if I do this, it's going to work out. And there just isn't the reassurance. There's no guarantees. We have to keep going without the guarantee.
Mm-hmm. And we want that guarantee so badly, and yet it's not there. It's an illusion. Nothing is guaranteed.
Anyone who tells you there's a guarantee, they're trying to sell you something.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and they're lying.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is it's such an interesting time, and those people like yourself who are actively choosing growth over the comfortable autopilot life, which many people unconsciously choose. They don't even get to the point where they're consciously aware that, oh, this is what I've been doing. And your leadership journey, Jason, really speaks to the incredible rewards that can happen when we choose this path, and also the law of polarity comes into effect. You're going to have the exact opposite. You're going to face fear. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You may burn out for a while. You may lose your sense of identity and wander around. Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I even here? But in order to get to the good parts, you got to have the bad. There's no one like your friend who sold, Salesforce. anybody listening who doesn't know what that is, has been living in a cave. I mean,
Right.
Salesforce, huge system that, someone created and, walked away from. And yet that person is still living their life. They wake up in the morning and go, oh boy, it's pouring rain out. Or, oh my gosh, there might be a hurricane that's going to hit. I mean, it doesn't matter. We're all,
Right.
we're all
He's a new dad, and the
new
baby doesn't
dad.
care that he sold his company to Salesforce. The doctor, the preschool that they're trying to get into doesn't care.
Nope.
They're just, yeah, hey, we have a list, and you're going to get on it, and
Wait your
I'm
turn.
yeah, wait, or get figure it out. But I think that's why having a coach who can both give you perspective but also challenge you. We often talk. I know you often ask people on the show about mentors and people who have been transformative in their lives. And to go back to sports for a moment, my gymnastics coach Lavan Karakanyan, who I switched gyms my sophomore year of high school, change happened. My comfortable sort of local gym was moving their boys program. And my mom said, you know what? We're going to use this as an opportunity to look around and see what other programs are out there since you're going to be driving further anyway. And we ended up at this other gym that had worse equipment, smaller gym, less, well known. The equipment was, it's not the same. But they had this new boys coach who had recently retired from gymnastics, who's only a few years, he's like 31, and he had been a national team member in Armenia, trained in Brazil, and then was now here. And he kicked my butt for, just a year straight. It was just like, practice was supposed to be, 5 to 9. We would routinely finish at 9:30 because he would say, okay, we're going to do conditioning. And you're going to finish all the conditioning before you go home. And so I'm like starving and, just like tired. And then I got to start my homework, at 10 o'clock at night because we've been training all afternoon. But he really leveled up my performance, and it did not feel good
No.
in the process. It felt really bad. But he didn't. One of the things he didn't do that my other coach did was he compared us to each other. The other coach would always be like, "Oh, see, you're not as good as so and so." He kind of pit us against each other, and Levon never did that. Levon, would yell at you and tell you about how you were doing all these things wrong, but you'd never be like, "And that's why you're not as good as so and so." Everyone got their turn.
Yes,
and
no one escaped.
no one escaped, and no one was, the golden, athlete, right? Everyone got sort of that same challenge. One of the things you'd have us do is max circles. So we would need to do at least 73 circles at the end of a practice. You really love this number, which is a lot of circles on the pommel horse. A typical routine maybe have 20 circles, but you wanted to make sure that you knew you had more in the tank, and you had to do it in one go. So if you
how many? 73?
73. Yeah. So if you fell at like 68, you do your 5 to finish, but then you'd have to go back and complete 73 again.
Oh,
I know.
well, how many, what was your, how many times did you have to do it more than once?
I mean, you basically learn after the first couple of times that happens to make sure to not let that happen.
Wow.
And I think that was one of the greatest mental strength exercises, he could have put us through, because you were tired. It was the end of practice. It was the end of the workout. And now you had to do all these circles. And two lessons from that. One is, you got to have your mental state really dialed in, right? We spent a lot of our time just standing there looking at the horse, getting ourselves psyched up and ready, fully relaxing our arms right before to kind of get as much, you can't be tense, right? If you're tense, you're going to use too much energy and then you're going to burn out before you get to the end. So you had to be like loose and relatively relaxed, even though you're tired, even though the pressure was on. That was a great skill to be able to stay loose even when the pressure is on. The second thing was you had to, when you got tired, you had to trick yourself. You had to, I would get to 25 and I'd tell myself, I'm already halfway. That was a lie. But I would say to myself, I'm halfway. Great job, Jason. You get to 50 and be like, oh, you know what? We're just going to go a few more. We're going to 60. We got to 60. So, you know what?
Wow.
We should do 10 more. We're going to go to 70. And then it was like, okay, just the last three, just for fun, just to, and then you would do one extra just in case he was counting randomly from the other side of the room and maybe started with one behind you. You didn't want to have that be the reason. So you do one or two more after that. And then you get down and you'd be like, okay, and so we do all that. And then the other lesson was that sometimes you did fall. And then, oh no, you felt so terrible and you felt so, and you get mad at yourself. But then you'd get back up and you would do it. And you would do the 73 on the second try. And you'd be like, I could have done it on the first try. I'm obviously more tired now. One, I can still do it even when I'm tired. And even when I'm really like, I didn't even do it the first time, you can still get up and do it the second time. So it kind of gave you that confidence. And two, it's just like, just do it the first time. There's no reason not to do it the first time because you're going to do it again and you'll probably do it. It just feel terrible. So just save yourself the trouble and do it the first time.
Do it the first time. Amazing. Wow. That what a great coach. And clearly, team, I'm a huge proponent of work with a coach. You just heard why. And not that someone's going to make you do 73 on the horse, but perhaps the equivalent, because what's the point? When I've worked with coaches and I'm working with one now, I want them to challenge me. I want them to push me to a point where I'm outside of my comfort zone, because otherwise it's just, you were having a coffee chat. It just, there's,
right.
what's the point? I might as well go get together with a friend. I want somebody who's going to see where my blind spots are. I want somebody who's going to poke me in the most tender place and say, that's what you have to do. And it sounds like that's how you serve clients and that they really respond and grow as a result of that. And for people who'd like to know more about you, Jason, where do you hang out online?
Well, you talked about my newsletter, which they can find at jasonshen.com. We're going to set up a special page just for, player position listeners at jasonshen.com/PYP, where they can learn a little bit more about my, gymnastics experience and download, the first chapter of The Path to Pivot for free, along with like a whole bundle of case studies about startups that have pivoted. We call it the $1 billion startup case study. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Jason Shen, Twitter at Jason Shen, and YouTube at Coach Jason. But, PYP, the jasonshen.com/PYP will have all of those links and everything kind of in there.
Great. Yeah. So team, that link will be on Jason's show notes page. You can, if you're listening on your phone, which many people do, just poke the link and it'll take you there, and you can download the first chapter of his book and connect with him on LinkedIn, which I always encourage. Follow him where he hangs out. And we need people in our lives who can model for us what we're not doing or what we might want to do, or just pick up, a tidbit or two. I have 2 pages of notes from our talk today, Jason. A couple of things I love that you said. The bundle idea is really brilliant. Also, nature allows and culture forbids. Also, give up so you can go forward. That we've got to be able to let go. We've got to be able to let go sometimes, as hard as it is. That's the only way forward. And this has been an absolutely great conversation. And before we say goodbye, would you be willing to share a couple of books that have been instrumental on your leadership journey over the years? It could be one you just finished or one you turn to over and over again, or something in between.
Yeah, absolutely. I reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, real throwback to a classic.
Yep.
That was a huge moment for me, and a book that principles I'm still thinking about to this day. I also really enjoyed Range by David, I believe it's David Epstein, and it's all about how generalists thrive in a specialized world, which really spoke to me. And the last one I'll share is our girl Brene Brown, Living Greatly, Daring Greatly. but all of her books so good, and really speaking to that. How do you overcome shame and find vulnerability and greatness through connection with others.
Great. So those books, team, will be on Jason's show notes page as well. And I encourage you to grab one of them, all of them, find a book off of your library shelf and give it a read again. I love, going back to 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That still has so much relevance today, if not more. Those are 3 great recommendations. And what can you leave us with today, Jason, as we round out what has been a phenomenal conversation? What would you like to give PYP, Team PYP, one last bit of advice or just tip?
Yeah. I think it's really to know that whatever is coming next, you can take it. And if you know a change is coming, just do it on the first go. Don't wait until you have to do it kicking and screaming. Embrace the change. It is going to hurt, but you can get through that, and then you'll be on the other side instead of still trying to pull things together. So that's the lesson, is like, you can take it and you can get through it so you can get to the next thing.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.